excellent socially asocial pets of ours who may or may not have much to communicate, but a change in what they say and how they say it, that can be a tip-off to behavior problems, pain, or a lot of internal disorders. It can change the way they say things, or if they say anything at all, or if they had been talkative and then aren't. Let's read between the lines. And by the way, in case we haven't met, I'm veterinarian Dr. Jeff Nickel. Cindy, hello, thank you for coming. We have Miss America with us today, of course, because she never misses these things. It's part of her job. And we have Tony here, who just turned, well, let's see, he was 14 a few months ago, and Gaston here, who just turned 7. And they're doing very nicely. You can see that they're snacking happily right here, because I figured if I'm going to talk about cats, I might as well have these two little guys motivated to hang out with me. So, I'm residency trained in veterinary behavior medicine. This is all I treat anymore, but I have many years of experience in general practice, and it's important to my work on disorders of the brain that are manifest as behavior problems to stay current on the research that underpins the internal disorders that are often related. I'll tell you what, the brain does not exist in isolation. So, thank you for coming. And if you can hear me loud and clear, please hit the wow button just so that I know that technically I'm not having difficulties. And if you find this information helpful, if you'd send me a few hearts, that way I know I'm being useful to pets and their people. So, tell me if you have a cat who talks too much. Thank you for the hearts. Talks too much, has changed. The cats, there are a lot of communications among them. This has been studied in groups of cats, and there are even names for these little things that they say to each other that has a lot to do with the interactions in a colony. That's what we call a group of cats who lives in the wild. But when they live in a domestic situation like our homes, we have a lot of changes compared with what their natural behavior is. So what we get with a domestic pet like these two little guys can be sort of an interesting combination of what they learn from us and what they would actually do naturally in the wild. So, if any questions come up, if your cat does this, or if you know somebody whose cat has any kind of behavior issues, by all means put their name in the comment line so they can watch or get a notice and watch later, because this will live on my Facebook page. So I want to read you a story about a cat. I'm not going to read it to you, I'll tell it to you, but this was a case that I saw about 1.5 years ago. And this kitty named Biscuit, thank you, Carolyn. This way I'll be able to see people's questions more easily. This is Biscuit here. Let me show him to you. He is 5 years old. This is a real cat. This is his picture. I don't know, this didn't come out that well. But anyway, here's Biscuit, and he's 5 years old. And these folks adopted him as a baby. And so, they know a lot about Biscuit and how his behavior changes. And again, it's those comparisons that matter. So, these folks had added him to a household with 3 other household cats. He came with his brother, his littermate. They got them together. And that's actually not a bad way to go. We often find, cats don't get along together, they're stressed, they fight, they urine soiled or worse. And those cats, if they have been adopted with a cat they're already very close friends with, we call those preferred affiliates. And in the case of a littermate, of course, siblings don't always get along, do they? But in the case of Biscuit and his brother, they were thick as thieves. And Suzanne and Sheila, these two folks who had these kitties, they adopted Biscuit with his brother. So they came into this household of 3 cats, so there were a total of 5, which is a lot of cats. And in addition to this, I'll get to it in just a minute. You'll see that the plot thickens. So what they brought him in for was that he was waking them up every night just about exactly 1 a.m. with his yowling and pacing. Loud yowling. I mean, this is a serious sleep disturbance. And not to say that people don't care about the well-being of their pets, because they most certainly do. Thank you for those hearts. But when it starts to affect them and their own well-being, that can change things substantially. So here's Biscuit, who never had a problem, and he starts to yowl and pace every single night at 1 o'clock in the morning. And they needed something done about it, and they wanted something done right away. I get it. The symptom is a very big problem, but it is a symptom, and we treat symptoms. We treat symptoms of allergic itching. We treat symptoms of vomiting and diarrhea. We treat coughing, and those are all very important symptoms, but it's the underlying cause of every single one of those things that better get a lot of attention, or all we're doing is treating symptoms. So I said to them, all right, hold on. We're going to have a 2-hour consultation here, and we're going to dig into this and do our very best to figure out what's going on and manage it so that everybody's quality of life improves. I mean, these two ladies needed to sleep, but also, Biscuit needed to feel a lot better, because it was already clear that he was miserable. And of course, they'd tried the pheromones. Not a bad thing, by the way, but not highly potent in terms of diminishing anxiety and agitation. And that, there you go, thank you. I was going to call him Biscuit. Gaston, you've got your indoor hunting feeder here, bud. He hasn't had his dinner yet, so he's hungry. So, here's the story. Biscuit and his brother were adopted in Albuquerque, where we live. And he was about 9 months old when Sheila and Suzanne moved with their cats to Florida. And they stayed there for a year. Well, while they were there, Biscuit's brother, these were indoor-outdoor cats. You can debate all you want about the wisdom of that, not outside the scope of this discussion. But Biscuit's brother got hit by a car and killed. There's a problem. I mean, everybody was attached to this little guy, especially Biscuit, because they'd been together since day one. And when we say preferred affiliates in a group of cats, we mean that they take a lot of their comfort and their security from being with the other cat. And these two guys, now we had just one. And this was a very big problem for Biscuit. And that's when the yowling and night waking started. But it turned out to be more than that. Well, there's Tony T. Hey, buddy. So, yes, that's right. There's Tony. Yeah, this Miss America knows the cats' names, everybody in the family. Our cats go outside in our yard, and she goes out and finds them sometimes when we need them to come in for the night. They never leave our yard, and there's a reason for that. And they don't ever kill birds either, and there's a reason for that. But again, outside the discussion. So, after a year in Florida, they returned to Albuquerque, and they moved into an apartment in a 4-plex, 2 up and 2 down. And there was a good reason that they'd moved there, because Sheila's mom and her brother shared one of the other apartments in the 4-plex. And those folks had 6 cats of their own plus 2 dogs. Now we're talking about a lot of creatures. And don't forget that Biscuit and his 3 other cats in his household, his familiar cats as we call them, they were indoors, outdoors also when they came back to Albuquerque, and so were mom and brother's 6 cats and 2 dogs. And this 4-plex, had a little yard, but only a little yard, and a courtyard. And they had one other neighbor in the 4-plex who also had 2 cats that were indoors. But of course, cats have a sense of smell that has been measured at about 1,000 times as acute as our human one. And so don't think that the other 2 cats in the other apartment were any secret to Biscuit and his compadres. So we've got a lot of cats. And cats, yes, they are social creatures, but boy, they can be too much togetherness. And that turned out to be part of our problem. So here's one of Mom's cats, a guy named Rex. Very lovable fellow, but Rex was a guy who was sort of the tough guy. And when he was outside, he would often beat up on some of the other cats, including Biscuit, to the extent that Biscuit had a wound on his head once that got infected and needed medical treatment. And a couple of these other cats in the immediate area had also been beat up and had a few wounds. Well, that's pretty stressful. So we've got a crowding situation, and now we've got fear and injuries. And with a history of pain associated with a particular other cat, that just raises the sense of intimidation that poor Biscuit is living with, because Biscuit was not a high-ranking cat. Biscuit was a lower status cat, and he was having a hard time escaping the reality of living near a bully, or essentially with a bully, because that was the problem outside. Well, at bedtime, that's when the problem, of course, began during the night. And as much as Biscuit would wake up Suzanne and Sheila at 1 o'clock every morning, his problem started earlier, and they would notice that at night, at bedtime, about 9:30, Biscuit would start to patrol part of the apartment. And in their bedroom, he would really check the perimeter very, very thoroughly every night before going to bed. And as he did that, he would start to yowl, sometimes go to sleep, but then wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. So, of course, we asked a lot of questions, and we came to learn that during the daytime, Biscuit slept most all day long quite well. It was at night that he had a problem. But they let him out every evening. And you think, well, wait a minute, was that a good idea if he's out there getting beat up by Rex? Well, maybe not, but we take everything in a sense of balance. So here's Biscuit, who had been an indoor-outdoor cat since he was a baby. And it's mighty hard to change that. Cats get real stuck in their ways, and they are inveterate and innate and natural hunters. And you could say, well, yeah, but if you feed them indoors, do they need to hunt? No, not from a nutritional standpoint, but they need to hunt from a behavioral standpoint. Cats are obligate predators. That's what they do. So he's out there in the evening when the rodents are active, and he's hunting. But so are the other cats, including Rex. So we've got conflict almost everywhere we go, because even when he's indoors, he can pick up Rex's scent. Well, you know, he's an agitated, anxious guy, and when I asked about if he was reactive to sounds and movements, oh yeah, if anybody moved quickly, he would jump and hide. If they tossed a pillow onto a bed, he was out of the room. They had guests come over one time. They had a child and had one of these indoor drones, and Tony T. And boy, when that drone came out, he just took off and hid under the bed. He was an easily freaked out kitty. So, what else did he do? Oh, there were other things he did. He bit his nails. Now, you might have known a cat or a dog to bite their nails. And frankly, like humans, it isn't really normal. It's a nervous habit. And one other thing that Biscuit did was that he would stare, when he was inside, he would stare up at the ceiling. There was no ceiling fan, and there was no neighbor above their apartment. What the heck was he looking at? Well, these are what we call displacement behaviors. These are things that a dog or a cat or a human or a horse can do when they are prevented from engaging in the kinds of natural behaviors that they really should be allowed to do, like escape, avoid, corners, confinement in a house, areas around furniture, being crowded. This poor cat was wigging out almost all the time, except in the afternoon when all the other cats were sleeping and not hunting, and he could finally get some rest. So here's the list of diagnoses for poor Biscuit. He was crowded in a high cat density environment, and he reacted to perceived stress with even greater, perceived threats, with even greater stress than after the passing of his brother. And you cannot really replace a preferred affiliate, by the way. What if they added another cat, Biscuit's same age? Might have helped. When you add cats to a household, they need to be very close in age to the existing cat, or they tend to have a real hard time. And the older an existing cat is, the less likely they are to accept a newcomer. Now, Suzanne and Sheila had a history of fostering cats when they were in Florida, and sometimes that does not go well for resident established cats. But the cats that they had been accustomed to that, coming and going of other cats. So it wasn't a real problem for them, and it usually isn't when cats are accustomed to it. So if they added another cat, that could help Biscuit, but that's one more cat to an already badly overcrowded environment. So I said, look, don't add any more cats. And if you folks feel at some point like maybe you're going to move to a bigger place, like get a house of your own, and that's going to help your cats tremendously. And obviously it's going to help them, because if poor Biscuit weren't so darn stressed, he might sleep through the night. Well, there were other issues too, because Rex, remember Mom's cat? Well, he would urine spray on the front door of Suzanne and Sheila's apartment. And that was a huge stressor for Biscuit. He didn't know what else to do. So we had the fear of Rex, and his scent was always there. And we talked a lot about the opportunities that Biscuit and all the other cats had to climb up and perch high, look out windows, and hide, get away from each other. Well, they didn't have enough of that. Cats can stay inside, and they can stay behaviorally healthy indoors. And of course, they're not subjected to the risk of cars like Biscuit's brother, or dogs, or infectious disease, or fights with other cats like Rex. But if they were raised indoors and they have lots of environmental enrichments, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, they can do very well indoors. And Suzanne and Sheila were totally clear on everything that was necessary. So we got into that. We'll talk here in just a minute about that. And I also pointed out that he was sort of conflicted, Biscuit was. He was trapped inside the apartment at some times, but other times he went out there and he would go out for a couple of hours and come back in scared and pacing. He needed to engage in his natural outdoor feline predatory and hiding and lurking and stalking behaviors, but he was afraid to be out there doing it. So this poor cat, I mean, he couldn't catch a break. So, and by the way, one important point that I made to Suzanne and Sheila was that, are you gentlemen done eating? These are these special little cat dental treats. These guys don't like them. So we'll have to come up with something else. So, cats don't normally cry out for help. When we say they are socially asocial, admittedly that's a gross generalization. They certainly are highly capable of social relationships, not just with other cats where, it works out well for them, but with us too, of course. But they really don't have a strong need for social interaction. At least most of them don't. Cats in the wild, they can spend a lot of time with their colony, especially the females who are raised in the colony and never leave. But sometimes, especially the males with cats, will have only kind of a distant tangential relationship with the colony. And if they have a problem with somebody, like Rex is beating the heck out of somebody like Biscuit, if they lived in a free living group, then Biscuit might say, you know what, this is way too uncomfortable for me, so I'm going to get further away. And in fact, I might even live on my own for life. Or if he encounters another colony there where he fits in well, he could be part of that group. Maybe only just kind of a distant relationship with those other kitties, or maybe he could become a very close relationship. But here's the difference. If you're an outdoor cat who's free living, you have choices. Now, the average age of a free living cat is only about 3 to 4 years. Infectious disease, feral cats don't get vaccinated. There's a lot that can go wrong. But from a behavioral standpoint, I'm not suggesting we turn our cats loose, but from a behavioral standpoint, understanding who they are, what they have evolved and developed to be, is a species with lots of choices. And so when we take them in as our pets, we often take those choices away. We don't mean to, but we've got to give them back to them as best we can. And so the vocalizing, the waking of the people every night at 1 o'clock, that was a symptom. And people, they yell at their cats, they throw stuff at them, they spray them with water, they swat them, and they're treating symptoms, aren't they? Punishment can work if you're totally consistent. Although most cats, if they get sprayed, they finally learn that, well, okay, so I get hosed. You should only hose your cats down if they catch fire. It should not be a punishment, in part because even if punishment is carried out every single time a pet makes a mistake, and it's strong enough every single time, the pet can learn to stop that behavior. The trouble with punishment, though, is there's never anything about it that teaches the pet what to do instead of the punished behavior. So if you have a pet who's already struggling, like Biscuit, and your pets can be stressed and you may not even recognize it. And if you punish a behavior and they don't know what you want instead, or there is not a natural alternative behavior, they can get a lot sicker behaviorally, and the cats and dogs who are highly stressed a lot of the time are more prone to other physical problems. Good example is cats who are highly stressed and crowded have a much higher incidence of upper respiratory infectious disease, anatomical changes in the wall of the bladder that causes physical bladder disease that is entirely caused by stress, not by bacteria, not by bladder stones or crystals, but entirely by stress. So we have a vested interest in the health of the rest of the body to take care of what's going on up here in the cabeza. So we have a cat here with Biscuit who's a wreck. So what are we going to do for the poor guy? Well, we need to give him a good life. So here's one important thing to do, is get this product here called, I'll show you the label. You may have seen this before if you're like Cindy, who's been to these meetings. This is something called AntiIcky Poo. AntiIcky Poo is a enzymatic odor eliminator that works not just because the enzyme breaks down organic material that's left behind in urine after the water portion evaporates, but Tom Kieselbach is here. I'm going to tell you about Tom Kieselbach. Tom and I go back to 1968. We were freshmen at Michigan State University, and we lived on the same floor in Fee Hall in the dorm. And gosh, about a few months maybe after Tom and I met and were friends, he met Anna, his future wife, and they're together now. They have an excellent son. And Anna was a pre-veterinary student like me, and we ended up pretty much in all the same classes, and we both got into veterinary school and we were classmates. And so the three of us have been fast friends all this time. And so Tom, thank you for tuning in. It's great to have you here. So AntiIcky Poo also not only has an enzyme to break down organic matter in urine, but it has an active organism. And so if you use it according to label instructions on urine, like Rex's urine on the front door of Suzanne and Sheila's apartment, and the scent of that sprayed urine was a very big stressor all by itself for poor Biscuit, well, that helps. Only one instruction. Other things included a floor-to-ceiling cat tree against a window in every room of their apartment. Higher is better, and it needs to be against the window so that on the other side of the window, and if you have a second-story apartment, these folks were on the first floor, but it's worth it to get a ladder to stick a birdhouse or a bird feeder, and you can get these from like Wild Birds Unlimited, and they have suction cups, and this is what they're meant for. Stick them to the outside of the window, and for a few extra bucks they'll sell you this film where the birds can be in there, you know, breastfeeding their young, and the cat's a few inches on the other side of the window slathering and chattering, having a very legitimate predatory experience. And you think, wouldn't that be frustrating for the cat? It can't get to these birds? No, these cats get that predatory need met by watching the birds eat or feed their young or nest. And so that kind of thing is highly important. And you'll find that if you have multiple levels on these cat trees, that the higher status cats typically occupy the higher platforms, and they are much less prone to be predatory towards other cats in the household because they're down below. Now you can get lots of these cat trees at pet supply stores that have, that I'm petting Tony, he's on the floor now, but they're 4 or 5 feet tall. They really have to be tall. At our house we built our own. It's the only way we could find one that worked, and have one in every room. So the cats have choices. They don't have to be with the other guys. The other thing that you need in different heights in every room of your house, and lots of them, is hide boxes. And some people have really nice decor and beautiful furniture, and they have custom built hide boxes. They do not have the opening to the box facing into the room, but to the side. And in fact, if the hide box is on a shelf pulled away from the wall a bit, then the opening can be around the back so the cat can slip behind the box against the wall and get into the box that way. Cats do not want you seeing them in there. They don't want the other cats seeing them in there. They want to believe that they're small and invisible some of the time, and they need that choice in different heights, in different rooms, so they have lots of choices. There are people who have like a 600 or 800 square foot apartment with a couple of dozen cats, and they never have any fighting, and they never have any urine or fecal soiling because they have lots of vertical real estate, exceptionally important. And a lot of it needs to be places where cats can hide out, but a lot of it needs to be against windows so that they can, be predatory. If you have a tree outside a window, that's an added bonus. Cats really need that stuff. They need the hunt and pounce toys, this kind of stuff, a little fish on a string. What do you think, Gaston? Yeah, I know you're, oh, he's got it. So these things, especially in the evening when cats are naturally in their predatory mindset, this stuff is really valuable. So environmental enrichments, and I will put the full, actually what I'm going to do on my Facebook page when we're done with this is I will post the page on my website, the URL, the link to that page on my Facebook page. All you'll have to do is click on it and you'll go right to my website and you'll see a very complete list of all the excellent things that you can do for your cats to give them a full indoor life. But those tall cat trees and the hide boxes are essential elements. So you absolutely have to do that. Now, this poor guy, Biscuit, was an exceptionally worried, stressed cat, and we needed to help him every way we could. And so I started him on anti-anxiety medications as well. One of them was called lorazepam. Many people take it, especially for sleep, depending on the dose. But the beauty of a medication from the benzodiazepine class, like lorazepam, same class as Valium and Xanax, these act quickly. About 40 minutes, it's on board. And these things can be effective for several hours. And I instructed Sheila and Suzanne to give lorazepam to Biscuit every night at bedtime, calm the guy down and help him sleep. And we did a little bit of trial and error with the dosing. We already have a dosing range that we use for these cats, but it was really valuable to have some freedom that I advised them on how to dose it to get the guy through the night. Very safe medications. You think, well, isn't that addictive? Yes, it can be, but cats and dogs are much less prone to addiction to these things than people are. And when we didn't need it anymore, we were able to very safely and easily taper it down. Now, at the same time, I also started Biscuit on a medication called fluoxetine. That's Prozac. And it comes in a chewable form. It's actually meant for dogs. Cats are happy with it. And we give that once a day. And Biscuit did nicely with that long term. And when these folks finally move out of that cramped apartment with all those other cats, Biscuit may not need any of that stuff. But this poor guy needed relief, so did his people. And we did end up succeeding, and everybody felt much better, and quality of life really matters. So just to wrap this thing up, let me tell you a few of the other things that can cause cats to vocalize excessively. And don't forget, talking is normal. We all do it. Well, our cats and dogs should too, shouldn't they? There are dogs who bark excessively, and people get electric shock anti-bark collars. There are newer ones now that have a citronella spray. It's a punishment, but it doesn't have to be painful. And it can have its place as long as we understand the underlying motivation for the behavior and give that pet what it needs so they can do well without making excessive noise. And so anti-bark collars, we hardly ever use them. People use them often and tell me that, oh, I've used that on my dog and it didn't work. Well, that's why they're there. So we generally don't recommend them. But, you can do that stuff, but you really need to understand that vocalizations are normal. A cat who does it more than they used to, or less than they used to, or it starts to be a painful yowl instead of just a little chirp now and then. My cats chirp and talk to me. Gaston in particular has learned that when he talks to us, it means he's hungry. Well, okay, we can feed him. And he does not abuse it. Tony, on the other hand, tends to. And so, if we feed him every time he comes and complains, then pretty soon he's pestering us all the time and taking his little tiny bite-sized meals and then bugging us again in 15 minutes. So you put him some other place. And you don't always dance to their tune because they will train you. I think you probably know that if you have cats. And that's called extinction. But we need to make sure that they're doing it normally. And again, Oriental breeds like Siamese, Himalayans, and Burmese, they are genetically programmed to be more vocal. And people with those breeds of cats, sometimes that's what people like about them. They have conversations against the change. So I avoid punishment. I avoid anti-bark collars in dogs as much as possible. Frankly, I don't recommend them. I try to talk people out of using them. And there's my little white cat chewing on my microphone wire because I'm playing with this cat toy. So don't chew the wire there, son. And so, empathy matters. These pets are different than we are, and they need to be treated like they're different. They need to have their own individual and species-typical. Thank you, Carolyn. She distracted him, got him away from the microphone wire. I don't want him biting holes in that. But they're different than we are, and they need different things than humans. And they don't just need to be punished. We need to give them feline-specific behavioral opportunities, which Carolyn's doing right now with the little fish on a string here. See if we can get these cats to jump back up on the table. Oh, here we go. Well, we almost have a customer. There you go. There he is. You can probably see him. He might make it. He's enjoying it from the floor. Anyways, so treat them like cats. That's empathy. That's walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. But there's also the kindness element, which again, punishment, even if it's not painful, it never teaches the cat what to do instead. So avoid punishment. Figure it out. Go to a behavior specialist, excuse me, Miss America, and figure out what's going on and do the right thing for them. And put those feline environmental enrichments to work that I'll put on the Facebook page. I like to suggest that people try to set these pets up for success. Try to teach them that you're going to build a solid foundation of trust for them, so they have the freedom to make their own choices, their own feline or canine specific choices. Because like us, if we only try to make them change to get our needs met, they can get obstinate. And then we start to get a damaged relationship with our pets. And that is not in anybody's interest, because that's not why we have them. So thank you for sharing a little bit of time with me and my pets. And these guys, Carolyn's trying to get these cats to jump up from the table. They're not going to do it if they choose to do it from the floor. So thanks again for being here. And by the way, you can get my Facebook Live events and my weekly blog that I put in my newspaper column in the Albuquerque Journal every Tuesday morning in your email box. All you have to do is subscribe to my website, and that's drjeffnicol.com, drjeffnicol.com. And it, of course, costs nothing to subscribe. And when you do, I will send you, absolutely no charge, my at-home pet first aid and CPR guide, which can be a lifesaver. So keep that handy just in case something goes wrong. Because my job is to bring out the best in pets and their people. And I hope I accomplish that. So thank you again for being here with me. Have a wonderful evening. Don't forget to wear your mask when you go outside the house. And I'll see you next week.